And so what I do now is I talk to people like you, and we take fear and we turn it into fuel. So something I challenge you to ask yourself, is fear in my head? Is it something to actually be avoided, or is it just something that I need to reframe? You can sit in fear just long enough, as long as it doesn't take you too long, right? You can sit in fear just long enough to just reframe it into fuel. And that's what I mean by turning fear into fuel. Athletes are doing this all the time, right? If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. So don't be fearful of it. Just have a plan, right? Have a plan in the back of your mind. What if it goes bad? And if you can start to live in this state of awareness, I've found that anxiety tends to decrease. Every time I made a traffic stop, I was in a gunfight. Every single time I went on a patrol in Afghanistan, one of my guys got hit. Not because it actually happened, but because I had to be ready. This was a mindset. Now, I did this to prepare myself. And I think a lot of people would look at this and say you're operating in a state of fear, but there's a stark contrast between fear and preparedness, and then also perception versus reality, right? Today, we're going to talk a little bit about visualization as it relates to preparedness, as it relates to turning fear into fuel. So if you're new here, I'm Kyle Stoy. I'm a retired police sergeant, 20 years in law enforcement, did 12 years on the SWAT team, and either directly or indirectly was a part of 100 combat missions in Afghanistan. And so what I do now is I talk to people like you, and we take fear and we turn it into fuel. And I say that a lot in the podcast. It's my mantra or my avatar, if you will. Like when I talk about what I actually do with these podcasts, with my coaching clients, things like that, what I actually do is change their perception into perspective. And when we do that, it takes something that's could normally be perceived as something negative, like fear, and then turns that into fuel. And today I'm going to talk specifically how that works. How do we turn fear into fuel? What does that really mean? And so the example I just gave is one of the things that I use, and that's visualization to prepare versus being scared or fearful. Here's something to think about. Great way to plant a seed of thought as we move forward here. So something I'd challenge you to ask yourself, is fear in my head? Is it something to actually be avoided, or is it just something that I need to reframe? So a lot of times we're scared of obstacles, right? We're scared of the things that are in between us and our goals, in between us and our purpose, right? And the best way to conquer those obstacles, a lot of times, most of the time, the obstacle is the way. Great book by Ryan Holiday. He talks about how most of the time what we're trying to avoid, so what we're fearful of, is exactly what we need to head into, right? I talk about this a lot of times in relation to land navigation, right? So whenever you're doing land navigation, you're going to shoot what's called an azimuth. So this is a part of our Rewired Experience framework or getting out of the suck. And that reshooting an azimuth is actually reconnecting with your why, setting a clear objective rally point or a micro goal, and then heading towards that micro goal while still emotionally connected to why you're doing it. Because otherwise, when you hit an obstacle that does scare you, then you're going to get off track. And a lot of people resist that very thing, setting a micro goal, understanding the direction they're going, because they know that obstacle's coming. And so, again, that's why I think reframing fear as fuel, as long as you understand it, And this is a heightened state of awareness, right? Versus something that you should avoid. You should dive into it. Now, you don't process it. You don't have to sit on it forever, right? We're not going to unpack it and unpack it. But what we will do is recognize it, and we'll sit in it. You can sit in fear just long enough, as long as it doesn't take you too long, right? You can sit in fear just long enough to just reframe it into fuel. And so this is what I mean when I say we're going to turn fear into fuel, right? So here's a couple of the main points I want you to understand with this. So first of all, let's define the difference between operating in fear versus operating in preparedness. And like I said, you don't want to, as Jason Redman would say in his book, Trident, sit on the X, right? We're not going to sit on the X where fear paralyzes us. We want to operate in a state of preparedness, right? So we can recognize the fear to really determine, is this legitimately trying to tell us something? And I think maybe you've heard the acronym where fear is false expectations appearing real, right? That's great. Like, a lot of times our expectations are false because our expectations are that we're going to fail or that we're not worthy, right? But sometimes your fear can fuel you in that exact same framework. So if you just understand that this is why I'm feeling this negative emotion, then it's easier for you to drive forward. And so we're going to talk about specifically some ways that you can do that you can reframe that mindset so that you're not paralyzed in the OODA loop. We've talked about that before. So if you're not familiar with that, if you haven't listened to an episode before, what we talk about is the OODA loop, which was developed by a World War II pilot. Can't recall his exact name at this moment, but basically it's observe, orient, and decide and act. And so the faster we can move through that decision-making process, then the more that we're going to sit and waller in whatever that emotion is, if that emotion's fear, doubt, whatever it may be. So back to what I was saying at the very beginning of the episode, a lot of times when I was training police officers on the street, when they were brand new, we'd make a traffic stop or something and I'd be sitting in the passenger seat and they'd be over there maybe writing a ticket or doing some type of a records check or a warrant check or something like that. And I'd just say out loud, I'd just verbalize, I just got in a gunfight. And they would look at me like, what? What are you talking about? What are you trying to say? They were super perplexed in what I was trying to teach them, or if I was trying to teach them something. And what I meant by that is that I was visualizing the worst case scenario. So that way in my mind, I had already scanned the quote unquote battlefield, right? Like, I know it's not a battlefield necessarily on the street, but it could become one at a moment's notice. And so I was thinking to myself, what would I do if that person got out right now and pulled out a gun and started shooting at us? And it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to even live in that state of mind, right? Like that state of awareness. But that's pretty much where officers need to stay to some extent, right? You learn to manage it better as you do the job longer, as you're in the career for a longer period of time. You learn to manage it. And that's why you can see the difference a lot of times in a rookie officer in the way that they handle their preparedness or their state of awareness versus like a veteran officer. Both are probably equally aware. One just tends to manage that emotion a little bit better to the point to where they don't necessarily make it known in the sense that they don't just wear it on their sleeve type thing. And this is where we all want to get. This is where we all want to get with our fear. We want to get to the point to where it's a state of awareness. We're prepared. It's preparedness and not necessarily something that's paralyzing us. So even on the SWAT team, we had what we called an immediate action drill. And so when something would go wrong, we had a plan for how we would immediately handle that, whatever it was, right? Like one that comes to mind is like when we deployed a flash sound diversionary device, often called a flashbang. We had a coming out drill or an immediate action plan, which was a contingency for, let's say that I pull the pin on that flash sound diversionary device, that flashbang, and I don't end up using it. For some reason, I look in the room and there's a small child, because we never blindly would throw these things into the room. So let's say I look into the room and there's a small child where I was going to throw it. I would have a contingency, and I would say coming out, and I would drop it on the outside of the house. But then we also had a plan for what this meant for everybody else on the team. So when that happened, obviously we had lost our element of surprise. We didn't deploy that flash sound diversionary device inside the house. And so what are they supposed to do? Most of the time, not always, we would go ahead and make entry just like we had deployed the flashbang on the inside of the house, right? So we had a plan. We had a plan for what was going to happen if things didn't go as planned. And that was our state of awareness. That was our preparedness. Because if we didn't have a plan, imagine the fear we would have of something like that, an accident happening, an oversight, a tactical oversight on our part, right? Just when I'm talking about telling the rookie that I just got in a gunfight, it was just me tactically preparing in my mind what happens if, right? And so that is an example of visualization so that you can accomplish preparedness versus fear and thinking, oh my gosh, what if this happens? Oh my gosh, what if that happens? Oh my gosh, what if I fail? Oh my gosh, what if I succeed? That's going to keep you from acting at all. Whereas visualizing these things in the frame of preparedness is much different than allowing it to paralyze you. And that's what I mean by turning fear into fuel. Athletes are doing this all the time, right? Athletes visualize the game. Before they play, they're going through the reps in their mind. They're thinking about, what if this happens? What if the opposition runs this play, right? We're going to have a defense for this. This is the audible I'm going to call if I'm a quarterback. I've heard tennis players, race car drivers. I watched a documentary about the Blue Angels where they sit and they visualize inside of a boardroom with no airplane, no controls, no simulation other than they close their eyes and they visualize the reps of flying these dangerous maneuvers over and over again. And this enables them to then shift their mind to preparedness versus fear and anxiety of doing this very dangerous job that they have to do. How do we do that? How do we do that in day-to-day life? And a big part of that is goal setting. So many people resist setting goals. I work with people, health and wellness coaches, in business coaching, entrepreneurs. One of the main things that I watch them struggle with, and that's actually setting some goals that they can move towards that are visual, that they can actually turn their attention and focus to so that they don't have to think about all the what ifs and the contingencies. And at some point, even if they plan for some of these contingencies, just being focused on that goal, being focused on blindly chasing that goal that you've set, that objective rally point that you've set, that helps you deal with the anxiety. A lot of times in the military, and then I had the honor of kind of help design the police academy for the department that I used to work for. And we designed into it a high stress period within the training cycle where it induces a stress inoculation. Now, mostly what we want to do is we want to see how these new officers, not just how they deal with the stress, right? We don't want them getting mad, losing their temper, that kind of thing. But then also, how do they lead others under that stress? Are they able to communicate effectively? Can they manage their own schedule is a big one. We give them a training schedule. They've got to lean into that so that they minimize their mistakes. And then we don't have to, what I used to call, spoon feed them, right? That I'm constantly telling them what to do. They're able to, at some point, they're able to articulate and understand and discern what are specified tasks, meaning things that we tell them specifically to do, versus the implied tasks. So some tasks we're told, we know they have to happen, right? We set a goal. We know that, there's certain things that we have to do to move towards that goal. Now, during that time, things pop up. And these are the things that induce fear. So if we train ourselves to be in a state of preparedness, to where we're prepared for that this may happen, not fearful that it's going to happen, but it's okay to play the what if game, so that you can make adjustments, so that you can have an immediate action drill, like I explained with the SWAT team, so that you've already visualized, what if we need to shift gears here? What if I need to change the plan a little bit? And this can also help you not be paralyzed, again, in that fear, right? By having this immediate action plan. And so we watch this within a couple weeks. Sometimes we watch these young officers in this high stress training environment start to really just to anticipate things that may happen. And that keeps them from the additional stress of their cadre making them do extra PT, right? Like corrective action through physical exercise, or we scream and yell at them or whatever that may be. Now, those things don't hurt them. In fact, arguably more PT makes you better, right? And that's the point of it. It's something that's uncomfortable and they may not like, but ultimately all of this is making them better. But what they're learning from it is these consequences that are presented make them more aware. So now they just have a better state of preparedness because of their heightened state of awareness. So they're now just moving through that decision-making process faster than when they first got there. And that's the place they need to be when they go to field training, because of the example I just gave you. When I was in field training and I was training a new officer and we were on a traffic stop, and a crazy guy like me says something like, hey, I just got into a firefight. And they're like, what the heck are you talking about? Right? Now, once they come out of the academy, they should understand what I'm saying, right? I can explain that. But had they not been through a high stress situation where they had visualized and prepared for adversity, for things to go bad. In the military, we used to say, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Murphy's Law anymore. I don't know if anybody talks about that. But in the military, we used to say, Murphy's going to show up. When Murphy shows up, what you going to do? We'd tell our leaders, what you going to do? What you going to do when Murphy shows up? Because if you don't have a plan for when Murphy shows up, Murphy's Law, meaning if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. That is Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. So don't be fearful of it. Just have a plan, right? Have a plan in the back of your mind. What if it goes bad? And if you can start to live in this state of awareness, I've found that anxiety tends to decrease. So taking it back to Rewired Experience framework, right? Take a knee in the first part of our framework. Take a knee, drink water, reshoot your azimuth, Charlie Mike. That's really just observing your mental state. Like, why am I experiencing fear or anxiety, hesitation, all those emotions or physical manifestations of fear? What is my mental state? Why am I processing it this way? And then drink water is really just about cleaning up your input, right? That's the mental reps that we're doing with running ourselves through these scenarios and having a contingency plan for preparedness, so that with these mental reps, now we've got clarity. Clarity is our water in Rewired Experience framework. And you could do that just by taking in positive things, right? Positive people around you, taking in information, educating yourself on whatever that skill or objective is that you're moving towards. For example, let's say it's a business goal that you have, right? Are you studying what it takes to be able to execute to get to that goal? I find with a lot of our coaches, I use tracking sheets, right? So a tracker gives us a way to mentally keep track of each step so that we don't get lost, right? We aren't lost in the emotion of it, in the fear of it, in which causes us to be paralyzed and not take action. So if I look at one of my trackers, which I'm looking at one of mine right here, if I look at one of my trackers and I go, okay, there's a clear next step. I've just got to fill in this next blank or check this next box or whatever the case may be. This is helpful in not being paralyzed in fear, because now you've got a plan, right? Like you're clear on that plan. And so it's easy to Charlie Mike, continue the mission. So what I'd say is to reflect on this, you got to ask yourself, am I mentally walking through this process? Meaning, have I rehearsed it in my mind, or am I showing up unarmed? If I show up unarmed, I'm increasing my tendency to fail. Again, it's like you hear all the time, you either plan to succeed or you plan to fail. So no plan is planning to fail. And so this is where understanding that fear is a great prompt to create that process. Fear is your moment to recognize that emotion and go, what is it trying to teach me? And I see this all the time with my own manifestation of anxiety. Anxiety is really the manifestation, the very physical manifestation of not doing what I probably in my heart know I should be doing, right? So at some point I should be taking action that I'm not taking action in. And then I avoid that. Maybe I procrastinate or whatever, or I self-sabotage, and then I spiral down into a reckless behavior, or self-deprecating behavior. And then I never get done whatever it was I had set out to do. Now I fall into depression because deep down inside, whether I recognize it or not, I'm probably regretting not doing that thing. And I understand that my lack of action, my lack of preparedness, my lack of planning, just my lack of trying, maybe my lack of actually putting my effort in and moving towards that goal, my lack of a Charlie Mike attitude, right? That Charlie Mike warrior mindset, then I end up depressed because I avoided that hard thing. Why? It was fear. Fear is what keeps you from moving forward, regardless of how it manifests itself. After I got back from Afghanistan, and I told you guys I was wounded, battled back, right? They told me I was going to lose my leg, told me I was never going to walk again, told me I wasn't going to walk normally again, but then I dang sure wasn't going to run. And I did all that. And I didn't have my leg amputated because I just refused to quit, really. But then once I accomplished that, I didn't reset another micro goal. I didn't go, okay, what's next? And I started having crippling anxiety. I remember one time I was having a panic attack, an anxiety attack so bad. First of all, I thought I was having a heart attack. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, there's fire ants biting me on my back. And I didn't have a shirt on. And she was standing behind me and she goes, Kyle, it looks like there's fire ants biting you on the back, because physically I was manifesting these welts on my back through my anxiety. I was actually physically causing welts on my back with my anxiety. And it was crazy because really, as I eventually moved through that and I reflect on it, didn't know it at the time, wouldn't even say that I knew it months after that, because months after that, I was still following that same pattern and then fell into depression, suicidal ideation, right? Like I just wanted to end it all. And it was because of that cycle of regret, that fear, and then not having clear next steps for myself. And then I cycled and spiraled down into that depression because I was regretting not taking action when I felt like I should. And once I finally recognized that, like I processed that years later, probably, I look back on that and I understand it now. And I understand that not being able to reframe that fear and push through that obstacle, recognize why that fear was there and come up with a plan to push forward, why that put me in that place. And that was several years ago, beyond 10 years ago. Even to this day, I find myself in that situation. Like I set a goal as, man, I want to be able to see my abs when I turn 50. I found out about 2 years ago I had super low testosterone. I asked my doctor, I was like, hey, because he obviously recommended TRT, testosterone therapy, hormone replacement therapy. And I said, is there a way that I could do this without that? And he was like, yeah, it's going to take radical lifestyle change. Like you're going to have to really change what you eat. You're going to have to change the way you live your life. This is going to be a radical lifestyle change. So if you're down for that. And I was like, boom, the path is clear. He never said it was easy. He called it radical, which by default made it sound really hard. But I accepted that as the challenge. And then I had that clear objective rally point, that goal of seeing my abs and raising my testosterone levels. And by my 50th birthday, I could see my abs. You can go to my Instagram. I got pictures with my shirt off. You can see my abs. And then also I raised my testosterone levels from down in the 100s to 700s-ish now. And so that was done through radical lifestyle change. That was done through making a decision. And I could have said, what if I don't have the discipline? What if it doesn't work? For me, it was worth at least seeing if it worked, right? And my contingency was, if I can't do it, then I'll do the testosterone therapy. That was my contingency, right? There's I think there's something powerful in me accepting that wasn't going to be a part of my story, because I talk to so many people all the time when I'm doing health and wellness coaching that maybe they've done TRT and it just didn't work for them, or maybe they're doing it and they're like, man, I'd like to scale back my dose. And there are ways that you can accomplish that through radical lifestyle change. Like, it's not easy, it's super hard, but I love that that's a part of my story, right? As a health coach, that's a part of my story, because I have people who do it. That was their decision. But based on what I've learned, I feel like it just makes me a better coach, right? Because I can tell them what I did without it and they apply it with it and they get 10 times the result. So it's that much better to optimize what they've already got. But now I accomplished those things, right? So right now where I'm at, I'm in a funk again with my physical results, and I'm looking for something new. I'm looking for what's the next objective rally point, because now I'm getting bored with the traditional workouts I'm doing. I'm eating pretty good, pretty consistently. I've got a great routine. It all ties back to that moment when I had set the goal to not have to amputate my leg so that I could walk down the aisle with my bride and I could dance with her on my wedding day. And then once that goal was gone, I was lost. It's repeating the cycle. So I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you, is what I'm saying. So one of the things I want to touch on again is that so many people, like I said, people that I'm coaching, they avoid setting goals. Like, even in our school community, which if you're connecting with what I'm saying, or maybe you just feel stuck in the suck, go over and join us in our school community. We've got some free coursework on setting goals. And I would say it's probably the one that the least amount of people actually start to do, because I think it's a tough one. Goals come with accountability. It's telling yourself you're going to do something. And then if you don't do it, it just breaks that promise to yourself. And you probably experience that over and over again, and to the point to where you don't trust yourself anymore. The sad thing about that is when people set goals and they don't accomplish them, they do lose trust with themselves, but then sometimes they lose trust with the people around them. And that can be very painful when you realize that. And so that can push you away from goal setting in the first place. I don't think it's because they're scared of, I think they are scared of the accountability, but what I really think is they're scared of the aftermath of not following through with that. They're scared of the trust they lose with themselves, maybe the trust they lose with other people. But honestly, like, having no next, not having a clear azimuth, that's what leads to sabotage. That what leads to self-sabotage, because you just repeat that cycle over and over again. And if you won't acknowledge that you need a goal, if you need a clear direction and a connection to a why, then you're just going to crush yourself one more time. You're just going to break that promise to yourself one more time. So again, this is where reshoot your azimuth in the Rewired Experience framework comes in. Take a knee, change your perspective, get into perspective instead of perception, drink water, change your inputs, visualize so that you have a state of preparedness versus and a state of awareness versus being in a state of fear. And so then you're going to reshoot your azimuth. So you've taken that knee, you drank your water. Now it's time to reshoot your azimuth. This sets that waypoint before you lose the path. And again, going back to that's why trackers are so important. That's why goal setting is so important. If you don't have an objective rally point, you've got no direction. And I know a lot of people have heard this over and over again, but if you can't see the target, how do you hit it? Even if you have a target, if you can't see it, how do you hit it? You have to visualize what you are trying to do. And so many people resist that visualization because of that fear of maybe accountability, but really, like I said, the aftermath of not following through. So I ask you, what micro goal have you avoided setting because you're scared of what happens if you reach it? Or maybe you're scared again of the aftermath of not following through and what that does to your heart and what it does to the hearts of the people around you. What is it? What is, like I mentioned, a tracker? What's the tracker you're not doing? What's the roadmap that you're not following? What's the azimuth that you're refusing to set? What's the why that you don't want to connect with? And again, I don't want you unpacking the emotion over and over again, but you got to have a plan, right? You got to have a plan for those contingencies. You got to have a plan for when things get hard, when you don't feel like doing it. It's easier to have a plan so that you can do it anyway. Think about this and frame it like going to the gym, a workout. I find when I have a workout plan in my mind, like to actually show up, this is why I love stuff like CrossFit and stuff like that. The workout's already built for me. You can have it on your phone. You can have an app that does your workout. But if I walk into the gym just going, I'm going to go work out, right? Sometimes I don't go. I have literally sat in the parking lot for an hour before and couldn't decide what I wanted to do for a workout. And so I just turned around and went home. It's like I had no plan, so I didn't execute. And life is just like that. That's such a great metaphor for life, where you're not taking action and now you're getting anxiety because there's something that you know you need to do and you're not doing it because of fear. You're not reframing that fear. And then it spirals into depression. And it's this cycle of self-destruction over and over again. I think about that story I just shared with you guys with fire ants biting my back and how this fear manifested itself into something very real for me and real for my wife. Like she could see it happening, but this is how powerful that visceral reaction to fear was. It was my body telling me there's something that I should be doing. And then the depression that came after that was my soul saying that I truly regretted not doing it. And I think once we can accept that is a cycle, that's the spiral that's we're doomed to repeat over and over again if we don't reframe that fear into fuel to drive us forward. In that story, I was resisting the next evolution of me, right? Like the next version of me. Afghanistan had changed me. It had taught me so much, but I wasn't acting on what I had learned. I wasn't acting on the new convictions that this combat deployment had embedded in my heart. And I was ignoring what my mind, body, and soul was telling me with everything it had, that I needed to be doing something different, that I needed to be moving forward out of the suck. And I was stuck in the suck because I refused to reframe fear. I refused to push through the obstacle. I refused to set a goal so that I could clearly see where I was going. And I just would keep mindlessly punching around in the dark, doing the same things I had always done and expecting a different result. I was locked into a condition of pure insanity. And my mind and my body and my spirit knew it. And it was trying to tell me, it was physically manifesting itself as something very visceral and very real. But sometimes people make fun of people that have anxiety attacks or panic attacks. I'm telling you, it's super real. I'm right there with you. But it's your body trying to tell you something. You got to move forward. You're resisting something. There's something you're resisting. And what's sad is a lot of people will fall into the trap of being medicated for this. They're told that there's no way to fix this other than medication. Now, I'm not saying there's not a case where it can be used therapeutically, but if you're doing it long term, it's just numbing what you're feeling. It's just numbing your mind, body, and your spirit, telling you that you've got to move forward. My body was screaming at me because my purpose was being silenced. I learned that when you have an unlived purpose, that it turns inward and it destroys you from the inside out. Your emotions aren't broken. They're your alarm system. They're trying to wake you up. They're trying to tell you something. And yet we're told by society that somehow we're supposed to suppress these things. Now, again, you don't have to unpack these emotions. What I'm telling you is move forward, get off the X, Charlie Mike. You guys remember, or if you've heard some of the previous episodes, I've talked about this episode so many times at this point, this story where I went on a domestic and there was this baby and the baby was crying uncontrollably. The parents are screaming at each other. And I picked up the baby. It's not Bubbles, just crying so, uncontrollably. pick up the baby and he just goes to sleep on my shoulder because I was calm in his storm and he found peace when I picked him up. And that moment woke me up. When everything went quiet for that baby, I thought to myself, like, this is the clarity I need. I need to not only find this peace for myself, but I can help others find this peace. I help the baby find peace, help myself find peace, and maybe I can help others find peace. And again, if you want to go check out our school community, Rewired Experience, you can go to rewiredexperience.com. Go in there. Any of those action buttons are going to take you to our community. And this is the kind of stuff we talk about. This is the kind of stuff we work through. We change our inputs. We set goals. We move forward together. We Charlie Mike together. Because everybody needs that moment of reset. They need that clarity. Sometimes you can, I think all the time, you need community to do that. And you need people around you who are giving you positive inputs to do that. And that's a clarity checkpoint, right? Finding that community, changing that input is a major clarity checkpoint. And that story I just told you, that was one of those Charlie Mike moments, right? That was a turning point for me where I knew I had to make a shift in what I was doing in order to not have this anxiety and depression cycle spiral over and over again. Look, we're all moving through Rewired Experience Framework, whether you recognize it as that or not, but we're all moving through it. And this saying, you can go alone and you can go fast, or you can go together and you can go far. And I think that's part of what we're doing here. We're building a community around this. And the framework of, like I said, we're all going through this framework constantly over and over again. Take a knee, observe what you're resisting, change your perspective, go from perception to perspective. Drink water, filter your thoughts and your inputs. What are you taking in? The people around you, the people that, are either speaking life into you or they're acting as roadblocks in you reshooting your azimuth, the next step to set your next objective rally point, your micro goal, whatever you want to refer to it as, right? Like, you have to have that. What is that? You can't just blindly go through life and not have some clarity in where you're heading. Like in my office, I have frameworks and success maps and all kinds of things because I constantly need a reminder of what my next step is, right? And then you just Charlie Mike. Look, when things get hard, you just have to continue mission. You got to drive on. You can't just, when it gets hard, quit. Look, it's not always going to be easy. The best you can hope for is keeping it simple by having a plan. If you don't have a plan, it's not simple. I can't promise you easy, but I can promise you if you have a plan, it can be simple. But you might be lost. You might be in a state of anxiety. You might be in a spiral of anxiety and depression because you don't know your next step. You're just not clear on it like I wasn't. So jump in our school community. See if we can help you. So let's work together. We identify this stuff. We open up to each other. We've got a cool community of people who are like-minded, who are truly moving forward together. So if you've been operating in fear, then I challenge you to shift into preparedness, using these tools and these methods that I've explained, because your anxiety isn't a flaw. It's not. It's there for a reason. It has a purpose. It's your next mission screaming for clarity. It's literally screaming at you for clarity, for the next step forward. Don't resist it. Recognize it and prepare by setting that next objective rally point. And you don't have to do it by yourself. So if any of this, and I know I've mentioned it over and over again, but man, if I can get somebody to say yes, if any part of this hits home, if you felt stuck in fear, in doubt, or if you've just temporarily lost sight like I did, right? What's next? I've lost sight of what's next right now. I'm in that place myself. Then we want you with us. Join our community. Go to rewiredexperience.com, click the links. Any of the links in there are going to take you to our school group, and then come connect with people who are like you. Those people like you are flipping fear into fuel every single day, doing it together. So drop into the community. check it out. Look, you can share your moment, or you can just sit back and take in others' breakthroughs, right? Maybe that inspires you. Maybe you just get in there just to watch, to check it out. But again, you don't have to do it alone. You can do it together with us in our community. That's our dream. That's our vision. That's our hope. So I'm going to wrap it up there today, and I'm going to leave you with Rewired Experience Framework. Take a knee, drink water, reshoot your azimuth, and Charlie Mike. We'll see you on the next episode.